In the previous session, we have discussed about two-tier architecture. So here, next to the two-tier architecture is a three-tier architecture. It has a intermediate layer between the first two layers. It is a client layer in the first layer and the last layer, what we have already discussed. That is between a client and database server. Here you can see this is a client here. This is a client. Just a minute. Here there is a client and there is a database server. Between client and this database server there is an intermediate layer called as a application server or application layer. The intermediate layer is called as a middle tier and also called as a application server. It's an application server. Actually this server is used to access the data from the data server into the client. So to understand that, we have to go back and we have to understand this three-layer model, which we have already discussed. I will go back and I will tell you that. So here client means you can consider this as a HTML page. Suppose assume that you are entering the student records here and it will be stored into the database. Now how to send the data into the database? That instruction or that particular function is carried out by application program. So when I was discussing about the three-tier model, so you may be in confusion, so I want to go back and I want to just clarify a few things here. I hope you remember this three schema architecture. The three schema architecture and three-tier architecture are similar. Here you might be confused also. What can happen is in the examination you might write a three schema architecture for three-tier architecture and three-tier architecture for three schema architecture. You should be very careful with this because both are having a same name, three schema or three-tier. Actually in concept both are similar, but here the levels are defined as conceptual layer, physical layer and external layer. Actually the same concept comes here. To general, it is the same thing. So here it's a external layer, this is a conceptual layer and this is a physical layer, but it is defined in a tier model, a three-tier, two-tier, correct? So the outer tier is a client model, the inner tier is a database server and intermediate tier is application server. As I have discussed in that topic, we know that as we enter the record such as student record or employee record, it will be stored in database server. There I had taken an example of HTML, PHP, MySQL or Java server, JDBC and SQL server. So here these are the interfaces. This is the outer tier which is a client tier and the database is an inner tier. In between one more tier is there, that is an application server or a web server, which is having the application program which will make sure that the data entered into this external form such as student form will be stored into the server, and that task is performed by this application server. Usually PHP is used when you are going for HTML, PHP and MySQL architecture. It can also improve the database security by checking the client's credentials, such as, see here what happens is when the data is accessed, usually the login of a database is set up here. So login information or login data is also managed by this application server. Now as I mentioned, the client contains a GUI interface that I have shown here how it will be, and some additional application specific business rules also. Actually the intermediate server accepts the request from the client, as I mentioned, as soon as we assume that there is a search button. So here, and when you click on when you enter the register number of the student and click on search button, so that particular search option will be guided to the program written in the application server such as PHP program. What this PHP program will do is it will go to the database and it will search for a particular student who has that register number. This is how it will take. So here the intermediate server accepts the request from client. So that is what I said, when the submit button is pressed, the request is sent. for selection of that register number, queries and commands to the database server, and this provides the selection query to database server, and then acts as a channel for passing the process data from database server to the client. Means then whatever the data is accessed here, that is sent back to GUI. This is how it works. This type of architecture we can call it as a three-tier architecture or entire architecture. Entire architecture. So be careful with this. One confusion is model or three-layer model or three-tier architecture. Be careful with this. You just go through the diagrams, it will be very clear.